All right, that's at least a little bit better. This overhead light is not is not very good, but we're just going to roll with it. We're not too high class here just yet at All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. But what we're going to discuss here today is some of the mid-major basketball teams that you need to be paying attention to this season. I'm going to tweet out the stream real quick and see if we can make this look any better. All right. As I said, welcome into another episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. First and foremost, make sure you are subscribed to the channel here, the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. You can also catch our podcast episodes every Monday and Friday on Spotify or wherever you do listen to your podcast episodes. The Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show is the name of that as well. And then also just make sure you are following me on Twitter at bramseyksr. So, as I mentioned, we are talking about some of the best mid-major teams in the country so far this season. Some exciting teams to watch, and I'm a small college guy at heart. I went to a Division III school, Hanover College. I coached at a couple different Division III schools, Defiance College and Wabash College. So, I'm a small college guy at heart, and the sort of Division I side of that are these low and mid major conferences that don't get as much national love. Maybe they aren't the teams that you think of on a nightly basis, where you're looking at the schedule and you're like, well, obviously I'm going to watch Purdue and Arizona who play on Friday, or obviously I'm going to watch North Carolina and Kentucky that play on Saturday. But these are some of the teams that are maybe a little bit further down the rankings. They're not going to be necessarily in the top 25. They're not going to jump off the page when you're looking at who to watch on a given night. But I think that you need to start tuning in, because if you don't watch them now, I think you're going to be watching them in March Madness, and they might be one of the teams that people kind of fall in love with, that typical Cinderella story, that team that, is a 13 that beats a 4, or a 14 that beats a 3, or a 12 that beats a 5, and all of a sudden starts making some noise. These are some of the teams that I'm going to pick out early on this season that could be that type of program come March. And we're going to start with UNC Greensboro, the Spartans, coached by head coach Mike Jones, who was at Radford for a long time, has had a lot of success as a head coach. And this is a team that is 8-1 so far this season. Early in the year, they had kind of a weird 2-game stretch in about a 72-hour span where they lost to Vanderbilt, which at the time that was actually expected. Like, Vanderbilt was favored in that game. It was at Vanderbilt, not a shocker. But then the Spartans turned around and beat Arkansas at Arkansas just a couple days later, which then sort of made you think, like, how in the world did they lose to Vanderbilt if they beat Arkansas? But that's obviously just how some early season games go. But this UNC Greensboro team, really good. As I said, they've now won 7 straight to get to 8-1 on the season. They have a game at Texas coming up on December 29th, which could be really interesting if they continue to win. Their next couple are kind of some toss-up games. They're at Marshall, at High Point. If they get through those 2 games, then that game at Texas is going to mean a lot for this UNC Greensboro team that looks like the best team in the Southern Conference so far. Now, the Southern is going to be pretty deep at the top this year. Western Carolina has been excellent so far this season. Furman always factors in to the top of the league there. Samford is one that was picked highly as well. But so far, it's been UNC Greensboro that has looked the best. This is one of the best shooting teams in the country, led by probably the best shooter that you have never heard of, or at least most of you probably never heard of, in sophomore Donovan Atwell. This is a guy that, like, his volume is out of this world right now. He is shooting 72 of his 89 shots this season have been from 3. He is 31 of 72 in 9 games. So, he's making almost 4 threes per game at 43.1%, averaging 13.9 points per game for the Spartans. He has been absolutely excellent this year. And as I said, one of the best shooters in college basketball that you may not have heard of. And he is a big reason. Like, he's almost single-handedly carrying UNC Greensboro's volume from three-point range. But they do have some other guys that certainly can fill it up from deep as well. Michael Brown-Jones is their leading scorer, averaging 19.4 points and 7.4 rebounds per game. He has been excellent around the basket. He is a kind of a brute strength driver slasher guy that's really good around the basket. And then also a couple of guys that are fun to watch for them are the Langley twins, Keyshawn and Kobe. Both those guys have been there for 5 years. They have played a total of 243 games combined for UNC Greensboro, fifth-year seniors. Kobe is the point guard who averages 6.4 assists to only 1.9 turnovers per game, one of the best assist-to-turnover ratios in the country. His brother, Keyshawn Langley, averages a few more. He averages 12.9 points per game compared to Kobe's 9.4. But both of those guys are dynamic playmakers in the backcourt that can make a lot of plays for Donovan Atwell, their elite shooter, or Michael Brown Jones around the basket. This is a team with the pieces to make a run in March if they can win the. I mean, the Southern Conference is not going to be a two-bid league. Like it doesn't matter. Like even if UNC Greensboro beats Texas, like barring them running the table, they're not going to get in that large bid. But this is a team that can be very dangerous if they can make some noise and win the Southern Conference. This is a team that people are not going to want to face come March. Another team I want to talk about that stylistically is very different than UNC Greensboro, and that is Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon under head coach Scott Drew, or not Scott Drew. They are coached by Bryce Drew. The Antelopes are 8-1 so far this season, coming off of back-to-back excellent wins. They won against San Diego State and then won at Liberty. So the Antelopes are really starting to put together some quality wins. Their only loss this season was to South Carolina. They also beat San Francisco this season. So they have 3 top 70 KenPom wins already, which for a mid-major is excellent. They look like a team that's probably going to, crazy things can happen in conference basketball, but this is a team that really should kind of dominate the WAC this year. I mean, KenPom projects them right now to go 16-4 and win the league by 5 games. That's going to be tough to do, I would say, but that's the type of season they're capable of having. And like when you look at the rest of their slate, like it's not unrealistic for them to run the table this season. I mean, I'm actually looking at their KenPom page right now. Literally every single game is projected to be a win at this point, just in terms of the point spread. But their only top 100 matchup left is a game on December 30th against Louisiana Tech. But otherwise, going to Stephen F. Austin, going to Seattle, those will probably be their toughest in-conference games. Tarleton State as well later in February. So this is an Antelopes team. We've talked a decent bit between the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show and here All Fired Up. We talked a decent amount, obviously, about James Madison this year, and I think that the Sun Belt is certainly going to run through them. They are a team that we talked about that can definitely run the table in their conference, but they have to go through Appalachian State. Now, I think that the WAC is deeper than the Sun Belt, but the WAC doesn't have another team like Appalachian State. So, and obviously, James Madison is still undefeated, whereas Grand Canyon has already suffered a loss. But if we're betting on teams to run the table from here on out, I'm not so sure that I wouldn't bet on Grand Canyon to be that team based on their schedule, their strength of schedule, the teams that they get to play. It's going to be really interesting to see what the Antelope season ends up with Tyon Grant Foster kind of being the story there. This is a guy that has been at Kansas in the past. He was also at DePaul. But it just never really worked out at the high major level. But now as a senior here at Grand Canyon is one of the leading scorers in college basketball, averaging 21.3 points per game. You have Ray Harrison averaging 15.9 points per game. Gabe McGothran, 11.7 points, 8.3 rebounds per game. So there are a lot of guys on this team that can put the ball in the basket. They are a team that attacks the rim relentlessly. They get to the free throw line as much or more than anybody in all of college basketball this season. I think they score like over 28% of their points from 3-point range, which honestly, generally that's kind of a variable where I tend to bet against those teams long term. But with the strength of schedule that Grand Canyon plays, I think they can continue to do that against the opponents that they're going to face. Probably makes them more susceptible to not making the run in the NCAA tournament. But I think that here in the regular season, you're going to see them continue to have success, getting to the basket, making a bunch of free throws, scoring it from 2-point range more than some of these other mid-major teams that we're going to talk about. This is a team that only shoots 31.1% from three. And they also don't take a ton, but they are just so good at getting to the basket. They finish very well around the basket, and they're also an elite offensive rebounding team, 38.6% on the offensive glass. So Bryce Drew is a really good group there in the Antelopes this season, and a team that you should be watching out for the rest of the way. Because as I said, don't be surprised if 2 months from now you look down, at their game at Tarleton State, and you're like, what in the world? Like Grand Canyon is 26-2. Like I didn't realize they were that good. Like yeah, there's a real possibility that is going to happen. And we're only going to talk about three teams today. We're going to keep this one a little bit shorter. But the third and final team I want to talk about, a team that's a little bit closer to my heart here in the Hoosier State, but the Indiana State Sycamores have been out of this world. And they're probably the ones that are actually catching the most national buzz. And that comes for a few reasons. First of all, I mean, obviously they have the past of having Larry Bird and making it all the way to the national championship game in 1979. But also, they've won 8 straight. They are arguably the best offensive team in the country at this point under third-year head coach Josh Schertz, a former Division II head coach. Number one in the country in effective field goal percentage, 61.7%. They're shooting 41.2% from three, 61.6% from two, also making a high percentage of their free throws. But this team can absolutely light it up from beyond the arc, shooting a bunch of threes, making a bunch of threes. They do a good job of not turning the ball over, and it's all led by a couple of dynamic guards and then one of the more unique players in the country in their front court in Robbie Avila, and he's kind of the guy that is catching some of the Storm national. Yes, admittedly, no knocks to him a little bit to the way he looks. Like he has this huge shoulder tat. He's a bigger dude that wears rec specs, like kind of looks like Nikola Jokic a little bit in terms of like he doesn't have the body type of a guy that you normally think of as being one of the best players at the mid-major level. But this is a guy that's averaging 16.6 points, 5.9 rebounds, and nearly 4 assists per game. Just highly, highly skilled front court player that pairs perfectly with their backcourt of Isaiah Swope and Ryan Conwell. Swope is averaging 19.7 points, an elite three-point shooter, 34 of 76 from three in just 9 games this season. Ryan Conwell, a South Florida transfer, Indiana native, as is Swope, averaging 15.2 points per game. So there's a bunch of guys that can put the ball in the basket there for Coach Schertz in Terre Haute. They are 9-1 on the season, have won 8 straight. Their only loss was at Alabama. And the one that you're going to have to circle if you're a fan of the Sycamores or just small college basketball in general, there's a couple dates to look at coming up here. Now, this coming Saturday, December 16th, they play Ball State at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Fun little, interstate, Indianapolis, Muncie to Terre Haute rivalry. However, it's the precursor to Purdue playing Arizona at 4:30 on that day. So you can go to Gainbridge Fieldhouse to catch 2 great games, an excellent mid-major matchup between Indiana State and Ball State, then stick around for Purdue, Arizona afterwards. But then if they can survive that, if they survive Tennessee State on the 19th, this is a team that's going to be 11-1 going to East Lansing to play Coach Tom Izzo and the Michigan State Spartans. And goodness gracious, is that a game that Tom Izzo wishes he did not have on the schedule at this point, as the Spartans are obviously now just 4-5. They're 0-2 in the Big Ten. They are, without an NCAA tournament resume at this point, having already lost to James Madison to begin the year. Like Indiana State's going to go into that game, especially if they win these next 2. Like those guys are going to think they are supposed to beat Michigan State, and that is going to make that game extremely difficult for the Spartans. It's also going to make it extremely fun to watch for us fans of mid-major basketball. So I highly recommend you start tuning into the Sycamores team, one of the most fun teams in the country to watch because they're so good offensively. And like I said, they have some games coming up that are just worth watching. They're already 2-0 in the Missouri Valley, having beaten 2 of the other best teams in Southern Illinois and then at Bradley. So, compared to what I think that Grand Canyon can do in the WAC, like I don't think that Indiana State's going to put up some insane record this year. Like they might win the Missouri Valley, but it's going to be at 14-4, or I don't know exactly how many games the Missouri Valley plays, but it's going to be 14-4, 13-5, 15-3 probably at best. Like they're going to lose some of these games because Southern Illinois, Bradley, some of the Drake, certainly Belmont. Like these teams are all good teams. So they're not going to run the table by any means, or at least I don't think they are right now. Maybe who knows? Maybe they will. But this is a team that like again, they're just so good offensively. They're well coached. Once they get to the NCAA tournament, if they do make it out of the Missouri Valley Conference tournament, like if they're a 12 seed, 13 seed, 14 seed, you do not want to face them in the opening weekend. Obviously, there are other mid-major teams worth watching. I mean, we just mentioned Drake. You know that they're consistently one of the better teams at the mid-major level. They have Tucker DeVries this year, who's a very very fun player to watch. James Madison, obviously, we've already talked a decent amount about them. I mean, the whole like Mountain West Conference, yes, that's technically mid-major basketball, but those guys play at a little bit higher level. Colorado State, New Mexico, all these teams that are actually fighting for at-large bids more so than these still kind of single bid leagues. So certainly you want to watch the Mountain West and how all that shakes out as well. But I just wanted to highlight these three teams. I felt like it was important to try to get some people on the bandwagon of Indiana State, Grand Canyon, and UNC Greensboro going forward. And they all have some big games, some big matchups here between now and the end of the year before they really dive into the teeth of conference play that I think are worth like it. If you want to say, okay, Brandon, like how do I get myself into mid-major basketball? Like, well, watch Grand Canyon play Louisiana Tech, watch UNC Greensboro play at Texas, watch Indiana State play at Michigan State. Like, if you can't get excited about that, then I think we're gonna have different conversations here. But again, sorry about the lighting today. I'm traveling, don't have my normal setup, but still wanted to get this out for everybody just to get some shine, quite literally, I guess, on some of the best mid-major teams in all of college basketball. Again, thank you all for tuning in live here to All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. If you are not watching this live and watching it later on, thank you for watching as well. Please make sure you subscribe to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel here so that every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, you can see these All Fired Up episodes. We will keep them coming every Wednesday at 12:30. You can also subscribe to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show podcast feed on Spotify or wherever you do listen to your podcast episodes for content coming every Monday and Friday mornings. And then, as always, everything lives on my Twitter at BRamseyKSR. So give me a follow there as well. And thank you all for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of the week of college basketball.